Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Index Office Hours. Today is the 30th of January, and this is Index Office Hours 142. This is the town square for ecosystem participants to come together and discuss the most important and relevant topics for indexes for all those who are new. Just that's our one-liner there, our mission. This is a call that is going to be recorded and posted onto public channels like YouTube. So if you're concerned about privacy, please bear that in mind. This is also a conversation. We love participation. And so if you would like to get involved in today's conversation, please do unmute your mic and let me know if you're having any issues, or choose to use the chat box or a sound effect, actually, because that seems to be a fun way that we communicate around here. Yeah, you could do that, and that's all accessible for you. Already, now I'm going to move on into opening remarks. And today I would like to shout out there you go. Thank you, Juan. I wish I had access to the sound effects so I could give you some love there. Appreciate you sharing the agenda there, my friend.
Juan!
There it is. Thank you, Vince. I appreciate you stepping in to help there. So today's episode that I'm referring to for GRTIQ is podcast episode 153, and that is with Rodrigo, who is the Chief Spirit Officer at 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗧. That's you. Oh no, Juan, you were doing so great. You messed it up. Oh no, that's the wrong one.
No,
There's the link.
it's the right one, but the thumbnail is wrong.
Oh no. Okay. Oh, Nick is not here, but I would. Okay. So great job, Juan. Sorry for putting you on blast there. Okay, Nick is the one who made the mistake, so I'll reach out to Nick about that. So we can get that
It's
sorted.
weird because on the website it shows the right thumbnail.
It does. Yeah, it's so strange because this has happened before. I ought to message Nick and let him know because this has happened before, and I've messaged him about this. I don't know. There must be something wrong with his CMS or something. I don't know. But anyways, that is the correct. What was that?
Pipe it to Tevnol.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Okay, so let's quickly move on from this. That's the link there. Check it out. Rodrigo is obviously a massive contributor to 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗀 and by extension the graph ecosystem. So if you're interested to hear about his story, it's a two-part series. Sorry, there's two parts of the episode. Part one is there linked, and it will be part two will be coming out very shortly as well. So there you go. That's the link. And with that, if I could get a news sound effect from Payne or someone, that would be awesome. I'm going to hand it over to Anna for our regularly scheduled Repo Watch section.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me all right?
We can indeed. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. Hello, everyone, to another Repo Watch section. Going straight into it, just like a news bulletin, starting with execution layer clients. On Aragon, we have had 3 new releases from least recent to most recent. So 257.1, which fixes disk usage increment of almost 100 gigabytes between versions 255.1 to 257, plus other issues in the transaction pool. Then we have version 257.2, which fixes RPC daemon that don't see recently retired blocks. And finally, the most recent version 257.3, which just schedules the Napoli hard fork on Mumbai. We are running the latest version, so 257.3, on all of our Ethereum testnets and a no-C schedule, and working without any issues. Moving on, we have a new release of Get. This is 113.11. This release fixes a few bugs and enables the Cancun upgrade to Sepolia and Holsky networks. Then we have 2 new releases for Firehose Ethereum, so version 2.3.0, which reduces logging and logging payload and fixes tool compare blocks CLI that would fail on the new format. It also fixes substreams to correctly delete the .partial files when serving a request that is not on a boundary. Then the most recent release from Firehose Ethereum, this is 2.3.1. And here operators need to know that Firehose blocks that were produced using the RPC poller will have to be extracted again to fix the transaction status and the potential missing receipts. So please be careful when upgrading to this release. Then on Nethermind, we had a new experimental release. This is from version 1.25.3 experimental 2. It brings performance improvements, but feel free to ignore for now because it is a release candidate. Then we also have new version of Avalanche. This is 1.10.19. This fixes some race conditions during validator set creation, fixes a C-chain mempool Bloom filter recalculation, and it adds a lot of Bloom filter metrics. On Arbitrum Nitro, we have had a new beta release, so 2.2.3 beta 1, which improves L3 support and fixes other miscellaneous issues. And that's it for execution layer clients. Moving on to consensus layer. Here we had two new release candidates for Prism. So 4.2.1 RC2 and 4.2.1 RC3. They both have fixes for Gurley Dencom fork. But yeah, please keep in mind they are release candidates. Then we have a new release for Teku. This is 24.1.1, which is a required update for Sepolia, Holsky, and 𝗨𝗂𝗨, and it is optional for other networks. Operators need to keep in mind that Teku will require an additional 50 gigabytes of extra storage for blobs. So 35 gigabytes for 𝗨𝗨𝗨, but theoretically the storage requirements can go up to 103 gigabytes. And this extra storage space will not grow above this limit over time. So again, be careful when upgrading to this release. Then we have a new Nimbus release 24.1.2. This is a low urgency point release, bringing support for the upcoming Cancun Deneb hard fork. And I've tested this release on our testnet as well. Then a new release of Lighthouse. This is 4.6.0. Again, medium priority release, providing new features, performance improvements, and bug fixes for mainnet users. We are running this on Gnosis 𝗨𝗨𝗨. Then on GraphNode, we have had a new major release. So last week we went into detail about release version 0.34.0, which was a release candidate. And we talked about all of the exciting features this release adds. This week, that was made the main release. We are running this release on Arbitrum Sepolia without any issues at this time. And then there has been a new release for Subgraph Radio, which is a 101 Alpha 6, and this fixes pub-sub topic generation issue. Just quickly checking. Any comments? Yes, Matthew saying reprocess your blocks for Firehose Ethereum. And Sepolia Dencum hard fork is happening in 4.5 hours. If you're running Sepolia Aragon, you'll need to upgrade to one of the most recent releases. And this required a consensus layer upgrade as well. All right. That is it. I will pass over to Juan. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Cool. So getting into Protocol Watch, I'll try to be as brief as possible. First of all, from governance, as always, we have Graph Horizon Explained, the proposal for the evolution of the protocol. There has been a little bit of feedback regarding, Brown versus Greenfield and all of the other points that Pablo has mentioned in the lengthy but super interesting Graph Horizon Explained thread. I think we're gonna be discussing it later, so I'm not gonna mention anything aside from that. Again, if you're interested in the post, or if you don't know anything about Horizon and you want to actually know something about Horizon, you can go to the thread in the forum, which is linked in the agenda in Protocol Watch. Then we have a few, add support for a few networks. Those are Scale. I'm not entirely sure how it's pronounced. Fractal, Scroll Mainnet, and Linear Mainnet. All of those have just been posted, or not posted, but they have the basic information to start either trying it out, or they have just submitted the ad support for thread, and they are waiting for the we can probably ask the blockchains how to pronounce some of them. Some of them are depending on the language that native language that you have.
Just a quick one. I know the team. It's Scale, pronounced Scale. It's confusing,
Cool.
but yeah.
I mean, because of how it's spelled, I thought it might be Scandinavian or something, and I don't know.
Scale.
Yeah, exactly. So cool. So yeah, we have a few networks that have open support tickets to have support for that chain. So if you're interested in syncing any of those, all of the links are in the agenda. Then we have forum research. Again, the same thread regarding curation. Why do we need curation? Again, it's not Charles talking about curation. Rather, the opposite. It's more of like a cool discussion about the benefits of curation and why it was thought of it in a particular way, and how it actually ended up working, and how can we improve it, and how can we figure out exactly why do we need curation, and how to properly have some sort of curation in the protocol. It's quite interesting, and there have been a little bit of a discussion. So I urge anyone interested in curation to read it. Next, contracts repository. We have a few PRs, either merge or open. That includes some chores, some tests for the contracts themselves, some chores like deploying some GGPs to Arbitrum1. I think those are the ones that remove cooldown blocks from the contracts, as pretty much no one was using it, and it actually ended up in a bug. So yeah, I mean, if you're interested in the PRs that are outstanding for the contracts repository, they are all linked again in the agenda. For the network subgraphs, we don't have new releases since last IOH, but we do have a bug report from Derek, which we are working on fixing and releasing relatively soon, which has to do with the FDS release, mainly that there seems to be an issue at the graph node level with some words when they are used in entity names. They cause some issues when the query types have to be generated, and they don't properly generate the query types, and they don't generate the plural and singular cases. So it kind of like breaks how the queries are done. So we're going to be using switching anything that says metadata into meta for kind of like a workaround fix for now. And also we'll be adding an issue at the graph node level to figure out if that's expected or not, and what might be happening. Cool. So that's pretty much it for Protocol Watch. So I'm going to hand it over to Paka now for Project Watch.
Welcome to Project Watch. I'm not gonna.
Welcome to the Gulag. If you survive, you earn your.
So I'm gonna
for a second there.
For
a second there, I thought that was a sound effect. That was really good.
I need to practice my my voiceover voice. But yeah, I shared a link to the Project Watch slides, and I'm gonna my screen shortly. Technology, man. Like a Monday. So Project Watch with me, Paka. If you don't know me, I'm a product manager at EdgeNode, so kind of a community member for a while. So don't hesitate to reach out if you ever want to chat. quick agenda. We're going to introduce a new section today because we got some exciting updates to Graph Explorer, but then the kind of bread and butter of this section, index your components, graph node, and then other updates. Appreciate the applause. But Graph Explorer now supports searching by deployment QM hash in the subgraph homepage. We've included a link here to get you started. I can even share that in Discord. Only the stream would work, guys. There you go. So I think this is nice. This seems like a cool quality of life improvement for you all. Hopefully this helps. Let us know. We'd really appreciate the feedback. Kind of along the Graph Explorer lines, we've also enhanced the, I haven't done it, I'm using the royal we in this instance, but made it so that you can use query params to kind of filter, sort, and paginate results, which is pretty cool. And we have some links here in the slides. Quickly pivoting to index or components, we've really heard your feedback and have appreciated your patience. We're starting some engineering plans on implementing cost models, namely on Arbitrum, and we're going to have some broader discussions across core devs later this week. So definitely keep your ears open, but excited to get work done on this and help you all just be indexers a little bit better. Was that even English? So
Very
the next
nice.
issue, right? Yeah, exactly. So another thing that's been like an ongoing pain point for you all is handling very high levels of grafting, so multiple depths or levels. And so at EdgeNode, we're thinking about how this could be improved from both the indexer and the subgraph developer experience, and just kind of some thoughts on how we see the future of grafting. So coming soon, TM, but definitely stay tuned. And with the previous issue as well, I've included the GitHub link so that you don't have to sort through GitHub or search for terms. Jumping to GraphNode, the main thing that I'm super stoked on is the declarative state and aggregations in GraphNode. So kind of like time series data, doing bucketed aggregations. That's pretty sweet. This is another collaboration with EdgeNode and the Guild. So we're kind of just deep in it, building stuff, but I'm really excited that this is kind of coming soonish. Not soon TM, but a little further out, but definitely sooner rather than later. So I'm pretty pumped on this. One that's kind of more for indexers is this pain point of allowing changing the block cache shard. We've heard a lot of feedback that this really kind of sucks, or not being able to do this. But so we're kind of working on this, but then I've heard from indexers that it's not kind of the entirety of the problem. So I wanted to take advantage of this time in front of you all to ask, do you agree or disagree with the following statement, that the core problem around this kind of changing block cache shard is that you don't have the ability to turn on or off block caching per chain? And feel free to let it simmer for a bit. I have a QA section at the end, but that's kind of something that I've been curious about to hear from kind of the broader community, because a trusted indexer definitely brought this up, and I was like, okay, this is probably legit. Quickly pivoting away from product. I personally have not tried turning it off and on again, but I will definitely relay that to the team. Other updates, Indexer Excellence Workshop topic survey, that's a mouthful. We want to know what you all would like support on from core developers, namely kind of educational content. So there's a link here to your thoughts. Let us know what you want. I try to do my best playing it off cool, April. But let us know what you think. And I'll share results as they kind of come in, and hopefully get feedback from you all next week and beyond. That's really it for me. Opening it up to questions, and hopefully I can answer, and if not, I will relay it to the more trusted, wise expert who knows things. And then I just wanted to show off this cool animation.
Whoa,
That's pretty
that
sweet,
is cool.
right? Props to Carl for the Google slide template. Made my life
Is
a
this
lot
new?
easier. So, yeah.
Is that a
shout out
new
to
one?
Carl. Yeah.
That's a new one, right?
So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's money.
It is money. Very, very nice. Alrighty. Well, okay, I'll pause if anyone has any questions or follow-ups for that section before we move on to the next.
It's like
Jesus
Ford has been
Christ.
jumping into the yeah, I know, right. Ford's been jumping into the what's it called? The chat. So I think he's answering some of the questions, but don't hesitate to tag me if you have one that I'm probably better suited for, that's a little less engineering focused, but all for the questions, and I'll be around. IOH. I'll kick it back to you, Abel, unless someone wants to ask. But thanks.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you all for your respective sections. That was wonderful. Alrighty. Well, the meat and potatoes of today's conversation is Horizon, which Juan has obviously mentioned in his section. And we are very fortunate to have a regular contributor to this call, Pablo, who wrote the actual proposal himself. And so, Pablo, if you're ready, feel free to hop in.
Hey there, how's it going? Thank you for having me. So, do we want to do like a full run through the proposal? Because I think it might be better here if we go to a more focused discussion around the things that have been popping up in the forum.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's get a poll for who's read the proposal and has a good understanding and wants to discuss specifics, or who would like a refresher and then ask questions. If you've read the proposal and you have a pretty good understanding of it and just want to go to specifics, just put like a +1. And if you want the breakdown before questions, do a +2. I'd be very curious to know. Because yeah, obviously we don't want to repeat stuff and bore people if they've already read the proposal. We can just get into the meat of potatoes. +2. +2 is like this. Look, just +2. Like that. And then +1. Easy. It just makes it easy instead of making a poll and stuff. It's okay. It's okay, Petko. Alrighty. Folks, please just I see Chris is typing. Folks, please just like mention or A and B. Yeah, let's go A and B. Lol. That's actually easier. Okay, A or B. A being you have already read the proposal, are fully aware. Oh, fucking hell. See, come on, guys. You love trolling me, man. So A being you've read the proposal and you just want a high level, and let's get into the meat and potatoes based on the comments, and obviously Pablo wrote the proposal and he has a lot of understanding. And then B being you want just a very brief quick overview. Oh my god, Petco. Oh my god, this call is just full of trollers, isn't it? ABC. Okay, we're getting a lot of B's, a few A's. I feel like it's an overwhelming amount of B's. We even have an actual B, like a bumblebee. So Pablo, if you could do us a favor and just kind of give a brief overview of the proposal. Sorry if you have. Oh my God, Ford, you're involved as well. Jesus Christ. So yeah, Pablo, if you could kind of give us a high level, and then we can get to the meat and potatoes. Is that are you cool with that?
I think Pablo just gave up.
Oh, I
like,
was
screw
muted.
this.
Sorry. No, I was. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm good. I'm good with going through the proposal. I was looking at
Okay.
whether I can share my screen.
Yes, that would be amazing. Let me check if you should have the rights. Yeah, you have the rights. Cool. Awesome.
And you all see this?
Fantastic. Yes, we
Cool.
can.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I don't have slides, but maybe going through the proposal helps.
Yeah, that's
a bit.
perfect.
Actually, I could focus on the summary. That is, the idea is Horizon is an iteration on the protocol. It gives us a more modular protocol that should be better prepared to scale with adding a lot more data services. It should give us more flexibility to add these data services, and it should generally, I think, improve the economic security of the protocol and make it more robust. So the main idea is right now we have the protocol contracts that are all quite interconnected, and they're kind of designed to support the subgraph as the main entity, the main data service. And that has this flow based on indexers allocating to these subgraphs and then getting indexing rewards based on that, and then also being able to collect query fees based on a rebate formula that depends on how much they had allocated. And the idea in Horizon is to split this a little bit more so that we have a staking contract that is a bit more modular, and it allows us to have a permissionless addition of data services. And this works because when an indexer, or let's call it a service provider now, because there might be data services beyond indexing, when the provider allocates to some GRT for stake, they not only allocate to a specific subgraph, they just allocate to a specific data service. And that data service will be a contract that has its own verifier. There could be a different arbitration mechanism, a different set of rules for how much you need to stake and how you collect fees and so on. So this will enable a lot more modularity. Right now, there are other data services that are being built on the graph, and the protocol does support this in a way because you can overload that subgraph deployment ID field in an allocation, but it doesn't give you the modularity of defining different rules for these data services, different amounts of stake, different fee distribution mechanisms, and so on. So by doing the split, we have this more modular thing, and it also involves making sure that these allocated amounts, so you allocate some GRT to a data service, we would like to make sure that this accurately represents the economic security, or it gives you a way to actually measure the economic security for that data service, because that's kind of a very core thing of what the network is providing is by having this slashable state, you give economic security, and that allows consumers to kind of interact with the network without caring too much about which provider they're choosing in each interaction. So by doing it this way, and by wanting to measure allocations, use allocations as the measure of economic security, that also means that all of the stake that is allocated needs to be slashable, and that introduces one of the big changes in Horizon, that is that delegation, because it contributes to the allocated stake, should also be slashable. Obviously, the idea would be for delegators to be as protected as possible, and that involves, there is a design decision that we propose, that is that the delegation would only be slashed after all of the indexer stake gets slashed. Obviously, this will affect how we actually design the interactions there and the slashing and all of that. But because that would only happen if the indexer or the provider has grieved a lot of people, so to speak, they've done a lot of disputes that they've done something wrong, then that would arguably protect delegators. And there is another thing that is like this kind of incentivizes more decentralization, because delegators are now incentivized to spread their delegation across many indexers, so that if one of them turned out to be malicious or get slashed for whatever reason, then they've diversified this this delegation, and they're more protected by that as well. So all of this is meant to also provide a more permissionless protocol, because if you combine this with indexing fees, that is a proposal that has already been around for a while. So indexing fees could be one of these data services. You put up some stake, and you use that to provide security for the POIs that you're paid for directly by a consumer, usually through a gateway. Then this gives you a very censorship resistant way to get subgraphs indexed, because you don't have any oracles in the way. You don't depend on the subgraph having the approved features and so on. And this also makes the protocol more permissionless. I mean, it's already more permissionless because you can already add new data services without going through any governance process. but this is an additional thing where it would be more permissionless. Because each data service can choose how its verification or its arbitration works, this also allows decentralized arbitration or verifiers. It kind of reduces the scope of governance in arbitration. We want, I mean, I'm speaking by myself, for myself, but like generally, I would like most data services to have verifiability. Because this is obviously not possible for everything, a lot of it will come down to arbitration. But because each data service can define their arbitration mechanisms, that could mean we could have an arbitration market where arbitrators compete, like they build a reputation for being the ones that more fairly resolve disputes, and then the protocol could allow those arbitrators to get paid from whatever comes out of the disputes, or like, yeah, there will be, I imagine, some experimentation on how you fund these decentralized arbitrators. So yeah, and in general, all of this should allow more efficient interactions in the protocol, because like right now we have everything very coupled with the curation fees and the protocol fees and stuff like that. In general, this gives us a protocol, a core protocol at least. It's not all the protocol, but it gives us a core protocol that is less dependent on all of these things. And that means that each data service could have different levels or different amounts for these particular fees, depending on how these things are providing value to that data service. And that means, in general, lower barriers to entry, more opportunities for competition, and also better prices for consumers, which should allow, a lot of growth for the graph, which I think will benefit all participants. So that is kind of a bit of a messy summary of the proposal. Maybe if there are any questions at this point, I think we can open the discussion, or if there was anything that wasn't too clear from this, we can dive into that in more detail.
That was wonderful, Pablo. Thank you so much. That was really comprehensive. Vince seems to have a question. He seems to be typing now, so I'm not sure if he's going to repeat it or, yeah, feel free to, yeah, either come off mute or repeat the question in the chat, Vince.
Oh, I see the question in the chat. So will this involve multiple gateways per service or a monolith? So I think it should involve multiple gateways. Gateways are already becoming a permissionless role in the current protocol very soon. Those GGPs that I mentioned that are being deployed, one of them includes permissionless payers, which means that any actor will now be allowed to pay for query fees into the staking contract, into the rebate mechanism. But here, each data service can define how query fees are paid, fees of any sort are paid. And that means each data service could have either, like, some folks might build a data service that involves some form of permissions gateway role, or even, I don't know, even it could be a staked gateway role in some way. But I think for the things that we're building, I would personally prefer to build it in the permissionless way, where anyone can run a gateway, and even like for some data services, there could be no gateway, and you have consumers paying directly. So I think like almost any kind of approach can be built with this core. I think we're going to see some experimentation. I would think that things coming from core devs would lean more towards the permissionless version.
Alrighty, we've yeah, okay. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate that. So we've got one question from Hope, a controversial statement of pain, and I guess Mark is keen to give an overview and his thoughts as well. So we'll do it in that order. Maybe Hope. Pablo, do you want to address Hope's question?
Yeah, Hope, could you clarify what kind of design decisions do you mean, or what aspect of the new allocations? Oh, okay. So in maybe in terms of like the flow of what happens, how the allocations work, I mean, this will depend on each data service. We're currently working on designing how a subgraph data service could work on top of Horizon, and we've iterated a bit on it. Actually, last week we got together and we were working on how that could work. Right now, what I see, because there is a balance between the economic security that you provide, how you bundle stake into different things, and the cost of capital and how it could affect the cost for things like queries. So in general, what I think we might do for subgraphs is you could create a single allocation just for queries. Forget about indexing for a bit, but you could create a single big allocation that is what you use as economic security for all of the queries that you serve on the subgraph data service. So for all of the subgraphs, and then that allocation would likely have a minimum amount that it needs to have to have this base measure of economic security. And it has at the data service level, you have minimum, so it's a minimum allocation size, and you also have a slash to fee ratio or something like that, and a stake to fee ratio that might be smaller. So you collect query fees by posting the voucher to the data service, and then the data service keeps a tally of how much of that allocation is used, so to speak, in terms of meeting that stake to fees ratio, to ensure that if you have more fees, you need to add more stake into the allocation so that it's properly staked. So you meet that stake to fees ratio. But then if there is a dispute on that data service, what would actually get slashed is more than that stake to fees ratio for each slash amount, so that you're not so limited by the cost of capital in terms of how much you can slash for any particular offense. So maybe to give some examples, maybe 100K GRT is a minimum allocation, and you only need to post, you need to make sure there are at least 10 GRT staked for each GRT of queries, but each time you're slashed something like, I don't know, 1,000 or 10,000 times whatever that particular fee was. But I don't know, if a query fee is a few, like a fraction of a GRT, you can still get a significant amount of slashing each dispute. Not sure if this answers your question, Hope. How does it affect network discovery? So I think there are two aspects for discovery. So I mentioned this is in particular for query fees. I think for indexing, we might still have something more like per subgraph allocations, especially because at first we'll still have indexing rewards. So indexers will already be doing those allocations. At first, at least for now, until we get a better idea of what we're going to do with indexing rewards, we're still going to have that. And that means per subgraph allocations still need to happen. And I think for indexing fees, it would also make sense to have that. So I think what we might end up seeing is that the allocation for indexing rewards and the allocation for indexing fees might end up being the same thing. And that gives you a way to discover indexers that are serving particular subgraphs. But there could be other discovery mechanisms where an indexer, without having to allocate and renew that allocation constantly, can somehow post on chain which subgraphs they're indexing. This is active development, so I think it might change as we make progress with implementation. There's also, in terms of discovery, gateways are already querying indexers to know which subgraphs, the indexing status. So that already provides some form of discovery. I also personally think having that on chain is useful for transparency and discovery. But yeah, there's some room for work, changes as we move along to development.
Cool.
So
is it okay?
Yeah,
sorry, Greg. I feel like you were going to do what I was about to ask, which is address Payne's comments and I guess concerns in the chat.
Yeah. So it's I think it's a tricky thing, and it's like that in the forum post I had this section about the the dilemma of consumer choice. So one thing I would say is like choice is already possible. People can already choose to just go for a single centralized indexing services provider instead of using the graph. The whole point of using the graph for me is that it abstracts that trust relationship that you might build with an indexer, and it gives you that economic security as an alternative to trusting someone or like looking at someone's reputation. That is already possible, and like even like you if you remove like gateways or like a permission role that is routing queries, people will always be able to choose who they query. The thing for me is, who are they incentivized to query? And I think like if you want a good quality of service, the best thing for you as a consumer is to send queries to many indexers, and in the case of indexing, to also have many indexers providing that service. Like if everyone, sorry, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we lost you for a second, but we can hear
you. So there are like this several. Oh. Sorry, I'm having a call come in and it's breaking my audio. I've blocked it now. So there are these arguments that I think like, so first, oh, sorry, 1 second. Sorry, I'm back. So yeah, I think like part of the core hypothesis for me in the graph is that the decentralized service will be better than the centralized service. So I think like if you're trying to make use of a decentralized service because it's better than the centralized service, and you are using it in a centralized way, I think that would kind of be, it defeats its own purpose. I think that might go with Chris's point that there's that core assumption. I think it's also worth going back to Justin's discussion about monopolies from the past, like monopolies built when there are barriers to entry. By replacing reputation with economic security, you're reducing a lot of the barriers to entry, and that should encourage more participants to go in. There's kind of no. I'm reading the chat while we talk. So just also to clarify a different thing, like I don't think anyone here is suggesting that or I don't think most people here are suggesting that we should have an indexer menu where you choose who you're going to have for indexing your subgraph. I think like the idea here is to build a protocol where these things are automated, and that includes an indexer selection algorithm at the indexing level as well. And that indexer selection algorithm, I would argue that the optimal one is one that spreads out indexing agreements with as many indexers as possible, because that's the way like that you load balance things and that you get the best possible quality of service for everyone. If you're trying to centralize everything, like if you're going to put up a gateway and just always query the same 10 indexers, then I mean you can already do that. You don't need a blockchain for that. You don't need any economic security. You can just like say, yes, I am Bob the data services provider and I use my trusted indexers for that, and just trust me, bro. Like the advantage of using the protocol is in that economic security. That means you can actually choose anyone. You'll get some assurance that the data will be correct. Can you all still hear me? Because I'm afraid I've been chatting for a while without. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Is that a request to comment from Payne? Payne, we can't hear you. If you're trying to say something.
No, I just told Pablo that we could hear him.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misheard. This could be a good opportunity to respond. I mean, I generally agree with a lot of what Pablo's saying, but I'm very curious to hear your perspective, Payne, if you want to jump in.
I think Vince is doing a great job outlining exactly what I meant. I'm not good at communication. I know how to write code. That's why I'm not in the marketing team.
That's fair. Vince, do you want to? I mean, I can see you're quite vocal in the chat. Maybe if you've got. Oh yes. Good shout, Chris. Mark Andre, I know you had some thoughts here as well. I didn't finish reading your post. I was in the middle of it, but then got caught into the conversation. Feel free to chime in as well as you, Vince, on audio if you guys would like to. Yeah.
I could wrote a relatively lengthy comment, but it's not that long. But there's a few things I really wanted to put out. First, thanks for writing this proposal, putting in writing. There's been a lot of discussion in IOH, and I mean, it's been in the air for a long time. It's great to see it in writing. So we actually have something we can talk about, and we even have a prototype of a set of smart contracts. That's incredible. That's fantastic. I really love that. But apparently that's an old version, and things are probably outdated though. But anyway, that's still good. People like me really like to dig into the code and try to understand the details. There's been a lot of discussions about greenfield and brownfield in the forum. I think that's maybe not necessarily pertinent because in the end it's the engineering team that know the path, they know the code. I'm sure they'll be able to make a good decision. I only mentioned that greenfield was interesting in a sense that if we're going to deploy new data services, we might do it on a fresh, clean slate. But from a timing point of view, that might not be a good thing, apparently. I think that Pablo just said that in the forum. We want new data services much sooner than we could get Horizon on the rail. So, and I think that kind of solves it. I found also interesting that actually looking at the code and looking for a proposal, everything will be permissionless. So that means we could build anything on top of the base layer. So that involves exciting things like liquid staking and maybe even restaking, but also things that could be completely unrelated to data services. So I was wondering if there would be some sort of control or limitations or anything in the protocol that would prevent that, if we want to prevent it. But I still found it a bit interesting. A lot of the good stuff will come with the new data services or the changes to the slashing, verifiable queries, and all these things. Really want to hear more about that when that will be feasible and possible. That's exciting, but also that's where the meat is, because Horizon is basically modularizing everything, opening everything, making everything possible. But okay, what are we going to do with that? That's where is interesting. So maybe I'll take a quick pause here. I don't know if there's something Pablo or someone else would comment, because then I will jump in the consumer choice dilemma. I think that's maybe the core thing at discussion here.
I think these are great questions and great points, Marc-Andre. So on the one about limiting what can be built on top, I don't see why we would want to do that. I think like we're doing, at least from our side, is we're developing this thinking of the data service use case, and that will inform how the interfaces for the staking mechanism are built. Which is why I think like there might be other things built on top, but they will have to kind of use the same API that is designed for this. So like if you're building a more generic thing that has nothing to do with a data service, and it turns out that you can leverage like these staking mechanisms for that, then I mean, I for one thing, that would be wonderful. Like it gives like more uses for the network and like that produces more network effects, which I think that would be a good thing in the end. And yeah, as you say, for the brownfield versus greenfield thing, I think like both options take time, and there is a very strong desire to get data services like supported by the network sooner than that. So like the protocol already allows for that, and people are already working on that. So I don't think even if we did the greenfield version, I don't think it would be fast enough. Especially because it's by being greenfield, it's a lot more code that you need to audit. It might like if we want to build it with limited upgradability from the get-go, that means maybe several audits, lots of testing. So until we could actually get that out the door in a usable state for mainnet, or well, Arbitrum 1, then I think it would take a bit longer.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Thanks.
as I mentioned, I prefer brownfield because I think like partly because I was involved in the L2 efforts, and I already saw the pains of moving everyone over.
Okay, well, yeah, great to hear that the new data services can be built on the existing framework, and then that it's a way. But yeah, I can understand that maybe after moving, at least for the user point of view, the migration was relatively painless. But yeah, of course, all the burden was on the engineering team. So yeah, consumer choice, lots of things here, but basically it's what's going to happen if we try to remove the indexing rewards and replacing them with DIP? I know that's not on the table in the short term, but if we go towards this direction, I think that might cause some undesired effect, right? Because right now the protocol is subsidizing having a diversity of indexers and having hundreds of the indexers and having maybe on some graph dozens of the rolled indexers. That provides a lot of redundancy, better performance, a great quality of service. And the graph is very, very strong in this respect. And that's thanks to this diversity of indexers. So now if we remove these indexing rewards, we remove the ability of the protocol to ensuring this diversity, then we rely on gateway operators to directly decide which indexers they're going to use and making sure they're compensated for the work. And every good gateway operator will understand that they need as many indexers as possible to have good diversity, good geo diversity, best performance, best reliability, and everything. But in the long term, it's only natural for a gateway operator to minimize their costs. They want to minimize what they're going to pay for indexers in the end, and then they'll select a smaller number of indexers, maybe 2, maybe 3, and maybe some gateway operators will decide, well, you know what, just one is fine. The customer doesn't want to pay for a very expensive service. I'll just provide one indexer, and that's fine. So we're moving to a model where we have a few gateway operators, one right now, and a lot of indexers, to a model where we have maybe just a handful of very large indexers that will be serving the gateway operators. And they may be signing contracts, they'll have some direct relationships, they'll have some long-term commitments, and that will change completely the dynamic. And eventually we could even go further where gateways will merge with operators. They'll have they'll run their own internal indexer for most subgraphs, or actually the subgraphs that don't have a lot of traffic. And that's not so great in terms of from an ecosystem point of view for GRT and the graph in general. And I really try to understand, well, is there a real life equivalent to this situation? Are there many situations where a private entity decide, well, you know what, I want diversity, I will make sure that I give contracts to dozens of suppliers. Well, no, most of the time people go with just one supplier. Unless you're government or military, you don't split the contracts just for the sake of diversity or redundancy. You sign contracts with with an army of lawyers, and that's your protection from a supplier that doesn't deliver. You don't go with a dozen different supplier just for the sake of it. So I really struggle to see where this removing indexing rewards and moving the response to diversity from the protocol and moving it to individual indexers, how that's going to sustain a wide and diverse indexer or data service provider ecosystem.
Thanks. I think you make some very good points, and I think you've presented what I think is maybe one of the stronger forms of that argument. So I will start by saying, like, I am a firm proponent of the network model versus the marketplace model for the graph. In that, in my mind, the graph should always be presented as this kind of abstracted provider thing where you get your data services from the graph. You don't get your data services from 𝗨𝗀 the indexer or 𝗨𝗀 the gateway even. So I do think there's a lot of the work that we must do that has to do with making this network model better. That being said, I think like there is something where like we can try to prevent consumer choice, but like there's actually nothing stopping you from setting up a gateway that routes all queries to a trusted indexer and then just send stuff to the network whenever they think is better. Like you can do that today, like even without permissionless gateways, it could just loop back to the existing gateways in the network whenever they want to do that. So I think like the only way that we win with a network is if the network is better. And I don't see how that can happen if there is no possibility for that competition and for like going for prices that are low enough. It doesn't mean that you need to go for the absolute lower prices, but it needs you need the prices to be competitive. So like I think the way we build that network model, I agree, indexing rewards have a part in that right now. And I would reiterate, I am like we're not proposing removing indexing rewards at this time. The Horizon proposal as it is today is adding indexing fees as something in parallel to indexing rewards as an additional way that you can use to get subgraphs indexed. Which like if you think of like why would someone use that instead of just paying the indexer directly out of band, off chain, without the gas costs, without that like additional friction, if you will. Like the only reason I could think why people would choose that is because they are using a network model. It is because they're automating indexer selection and not selecting based on nepotism or whatever, because the network gives you that economic security. And to your point about like real world examples, yes, in general, it is states that can allocate resources in ways that favor decentralization like that. They are often quite inefficient at that. Yeah, I'm saying this as an Argentinian. But also, like, states don't have automated mechanisms for economic security. There is no equivalent to the staking, like the proof of stake in the real world. So I think like the reason we don't see a lot of examples of this in the real world is because we have a new primitive that wasn't around before. That is, you can abstract security, you can abstract trust and reputation with something that is just, you have cost of capital as a replacement. Obviously, cost of capital is not free. Security, crypto economic security is not free. I think a core hypothesis here is people will prefer the network model because the replacing reputation is also expensive and marketing is also expensive. So I think in the end, the balance will be in favor of this thing where you have a lot of participants that are competing. They're only competing on the quality of their service and their price, and they're not competing on marketing, reputation, and stuff like that. So it feels antithetical to try to compete within a system like that with reputation when other participants like indexers like you have the advantage of not having to care about building a marketing department because you're just providing good service on the network at a good price. I do think you'll need to compete on price. I don't think there's any escape from that. Whether we build it into a network or not, there is nothing we can do to stop people from choosing the better service at the better price. So how do we make that the network service? How do we make the network provide a service that is the better service at the better price? And I don't see another way that it's that internal competition.
Cool,
You didn't
thanks.
want to get political. I see some interesting pictures in the chat.
Yeah, so what I gather is that we have to make the staking mechanism better than the legal system, basically. So we have for the gateway operators, it must be easier and less expensive and maybe more secure to use staking from the indexers instead of having them signing contracts. Basically, I think that's that's the key here.
Yeah, I think if we can the network gets network effects because everyone is using the network, because we have, I don't know, composability of data services, which we still don't have. And if it's clear to consumers that the best way to get the best quality of service is if they choose many indexers, or if they let the ISA choose for them, and not if they want to choose manually. For me, having that economic security is what will give them the assurance that they can do that safely. You don't need to trust Bob because you trust the network. For me, that is a key thing, and I think we can't escape people choosing. So this is kind of how we bring that competition into the network instead of letting people forcing people to go outside the network to a centralized provider to get a hypothetically better service. I really think we can give a better service from within the network. Yeah, and I don't see how a centralized actor would be able to profit from the reputation if they are competing with this abstracted provider that is the network, that people don't even need to choose a provider. They just send queries with whatever way that the network proposes is a standard ISA or the optimal ISA for whatever parameters that each particular consumer has, right? Some people will care more about economic security, others will care more about latency and stuff like that. So I do think there is some margin for different sorts of ISAs, but I think if we bake in the decentralization into that ISA, I think people will go for that because it will be the best service. And also, for indexing. Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it will be the next best servers, that's for sure. It's just that, unfortunately, like many things, when it comes to decentralization, that many end user really care about it. So, and basically, I think we'll have to rely on the social layer to make sure that happens, and people have to be educated about the risks of centralized services in terms of data reliability and uptime, because until the service breaks, until it returns an error 500, people don't really care about these things.
I agree, but that's where I think the power of like part of the power of the network is we can go into the world and say, choose the graph. Don't choose like Bob, choose the graph, and then the graph presents itself in this way where the user doesn't need to choose, because they can rely on ISA, because they can rely on the gateway choosing for them, or the gateways choosing for them. Like there is this thing where like as a community we can go out into the world and compete, and be much stronger than any particular indexer or service provider that wants to like go around or outside the system. Yeah, people don't want to, but also like people don't care about decentralization, but they also don't want to have to choose. I think like from what I've heard from dev roles and business folks, like in general, I don't think a lot of subgraph developers are like anxious to choose who is the indexer that is serving their subgraphs, but rather they want the opposite. That is, I just want my subgraph indexed and I want good quality of service, and that's all I care about. So if we can give them an automated way to get that, and that automated way is decentralized, then I think decentralization wins. I would also add on the indexing rewards thing. So we'll have the current mechanism for now. We are thinking of other possibilities, and I think for any change that we do, we are, at least from the core devs, I think from Node or the team I'm part of, we are very conscious that we can't just like remove this mechanism and just leave indexers to fend off for themselves. Like first, because the community would never go with it, and second, because we know it wouldn't work. So I think like there are some ideas going around. Like it wasn't proposed by me originally, but there's been discussions about maybe having some sort of DAO that manages issuance, and it uses this indexing fees mechanism in a decentralized way to generate more indexing fee agreements for more indexers. So a developer comes in and pays for one or two indexers to index their subgraph, and then this DAO comes in and it amplifies that with adding 10, 15 more indexers because it's a useful and valuable subgraph or whatever. And the DAO is paying market price, which makes it a much more efficient mechanism than the current one. But it's still like reinforcing this like decentralized network thing versus this like single provider marketplace thing. I agree with Derek. Like, yeah, if we're selling decentralization, so to speak, and people don't want decentralization, we're going to have more trouble than if we sell like good service and good products. Yeah, I didn't want to talk about this like DAO curation, different issuance mechanism in the forum post, but I do think it's something worth exploring in separate threads. But in general, it's, yeah, any new issuance mechanism should account for this. Like maybe eventually there are several 100 million GRT of query fees flowing through a network, and then we don't need a mechanism like this, and then issuance can be sent to other purposes. But I think until we get there, we do need some amount of issuance being used to support this kind of mechanism. Again, speaking for myself, I don't know if everyone agrees with that within the team or in other core devs, but that's what I see at least.
Wow, this is a very in-depth conversation. I see. Oh, yeah, lol. I forgot about the POAP there. We might, yeah, we're just a minute to the mint window. Apologies for not posting that sooner. Thank you, Pilly. I was so engrossed in this debate or conversation, I should say, that I completely forgot about POAPs. But there you go. You can go ahead and get your POAPs there. Pablo, I want to pause here for a second. Now that we have this quiet time, I obviously asked for your time, which I'm very grateful for. You allocated an hour to this. It seems like it's a very juicy topic that people want to discuss. I would say let's get everyone to direct their attention to the forum. So all of the questions, all of the conversation, and by the way, after we cut the recording, folks are more than welcome to stick around, and that includes you, Pablo. But again, I don't want to put the pressure on you because I asked you to come here, and I don't want to ask you for more time than required. So let's do this. So folks, stick around if you want, have a chat. Please funnel your comments and stuff to the forum, and then maybe Pablo, if you're okay with this, next week we can have you again and just continue the conversation. Is that something you're open to?
Yes, sorry, I was muted and I lost the window. Yes, I can stay for a bit more. I think at past I should probably go. But I'd also be happy to come again here next week. I'm checking my calendar, but I'm quite sure I can make it. Yeah, I can definitely make it next week.
Fantastic. Let's do that then. So if anyone has any additional questions, Pablo's going to stick around with us for a little bit, but obviously let's not take up too much of his time. He's been very generous with us, with his time to us, and obviously we can have a much meatier conversation. And I'll know it's going to be a very meaty conversation, so I'll carve out extra time next week so that we can go into details. But yeah, we've got him for until the half an hour mark, as he says. So let's keep going. Yeah.
So I think, Vince, are you proposing some form of consensus mechanism from gateways to figure out quality of service and stuff like that? I see. Yeah, I actually had a proposal related to that a while ago. Like, I was thinking we could try to have something like that, and so we have spent some time exploring that kind of solution, and there are a few problems with that. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the thing with quality of services, it's not verifiable, so it's kind of very much in the eye of the beholder. Like if different gateways have different results, coming to consensus around that is much harder. So it works a lot more like a decentralized oracle, something like Chainlink or Chronicle, where each gateway is looking at information that others can't verify and see if what they're saying is true or not. And that makes it a lot harder to build a consensus algorithm that is Byzantine fault tolerant. So yeah, it is quite tricky. And there is another problem there, that is whatever consensus mechanism we build would then have a security that has to do with how much these gateways would have to stake. And it would be very, very hard to make that a significant amount of economic security unless we required a huge amount of staked GRT from gateways. And then you need to think about how you incentivize those gateways for them to have that stake there. And then that means gateways are going to want to make some sort of profit. So we either provide issuance to gateways, or we do some other thing. And like it becomes very messy, very, very fast. So yeah, I'm not saying it's impossible. I think like we have studied this problem so far, and this is why like we've come to this like indexing fees as the simplest mechanism, and then we can try to build other stuff like consensus and stuff like that on top of it, rather than try to build a primitive on top of a primitive that is much harder or more complex. Yeah, you can pull in stake from indexer stake, but then you have indexers kind of delegating to gateways in a way, and then that gives you another form of nepotism where like gateways will only want to route queries to the indexers that stake on them, or you have indexers themselves be the ones being this sort of oracle, and then maybe that works, but then you need each indexer to kind of query all the other indexers for quality of service and stuff like that. So like, again, it becomes very complex very fast. Yeah, I think like we could definitely explore those things, but I feel like if we don't move towards enabling indexing fees, like we're missing out on like adding something that is net positive to the network, because we're not removing indexing rewards. We're like allowing something that is currently possible outside the network to happen inside the network and make use of the economic security of the network, which reduces barriers to entry. But I think like we could move towards like this while we still investigate all of those other things. Like if your team wants to put in research time into that, I think that would be amazing. I would also like yeah, it's a topic I'm curious about as well. So I would spend some time on that. I don't know if other folks, but like I think we're proposing like building core primitives that are simpler and then trying to build on top of those for issuance and stuff like that. Yeah, the decentralized Oracle for QoS thing is not too straightforward. Well, yeah.
I think part of this problem that I'm super interested in is like the query volume, query fees side of things. Like once we have permissionless payers, an indexer could theoretically set up their own gateway and just pay themselves for queries, which isn't really that beneficial to them right now. But as a lot of our discussions around removing indexing rewards revolved around how can we, instead of incentivizing just syncing a subgraph, incentivize responding to queries on a subgraph, and how can we have verified query volume so we can give rewards to those indexers. We found that that's pretty impossible in the current state to not have them spoofable. So that's an angle that I'm still curious about. That's a very difficult problem.
Yeah, I think that one is actually like that might be provably impossible. But like I think Vince, the way I'm thinking about like rewards built on top of indexing fees is like, as Ford says, like we have no way of validating that query fees are real. Building a decentralized QoS oracle might be possible, but it is impossible to build it permissionlessly. Like you end up having an oracle. It's centralized, it's distributed, but it's an oracle. And if for whatever reason that oracle has some consensus on denying you service, then you need that oracle's permission in a way to participate. Which is why I think like the way we're thinking about this is we have this fully permissionless thing that is anyone can pay for indexing, and then on top of it you could have a DAO or something like that has like humans in the loop. We acknowledge it has humans in the loop. We acknowledge it can use oracles, it can use decentralized oracles, it can use indexers, it can use gateway data, like a lot more information that doesn't live on chain. And that's why like in the forum post I was talking about distributing issuance outside of the core protocol. And then this DAO can give something that is very similar to indexing rewards today, but it does so by doing indexing fees. So this DAO could be very decentralized. It could be like a curator DAO with a lot of people that has a mechanism for joining and participating, and like contributing to how these rewards or this issuance is distributed across subgraphs or data services in general. But the mechanism by which this DAO can provide these rewards and can build can make use of all of these oracles is by paying indexing fees. So we still get all of these advantages of what you mentioned. Like it gives us like this consensus, the possibility of using consensus about QoS, the possibility about for I don't know, using data from different gateways to know if indexers are actually serving queries or not and stuff like that. So it's kind of giving us a much stronger primitive, and also acknowledging the places where we need consensus, or we need humans in the loop, or we need more permission things, but you still have this fully permissionless thing on the side that you can use if you don't want to go through that, or if you don't trust that DAO, or you don't want to rely on the permission, so to speak, of this DAO, even if this DAO is decentralized.
So does that problem still exist if the gateways had a consensus mechanism of, coming to, it's obviously a lot of metrics to come to consensus to, especially at the rapid speed that it would need. But is there some form that we can possibly think about in coming to consensus on, who is the best indexer on whatever metrics, I guess, the protocol deems sufficient for finding the best indexer? Every indexer knows those metrics, and all the gateways are coming to consensus on who is the best for that, who's the second best for that, stuff like that. And there's no, high level oracle at the top. It's every indexer is required to run, some type of oracle, like a container, Docker container, whatever, run the oracle binary to be able to index in the first place. And when you're running that, it talks to all the other oracles on the network, and you come to consensus, similar to how a lot of secondary services on Cosmos chains work with Pegon Injective or the Price Oracle dashboard on Kujira, stuff like that, where all the operators or validators are required to also run those secondary Oracle services, otherwise their validator is slashed.
Well, I think it's a super interesting idea to have this kind of decentralized ISA where many gateways kind of collaborate to provide a best like centralized response for what indexer to choose for what. I think requiring that makes it a permission system. Like you can come to consensus around it, but there are a few problems. Like, how do you validate that everyone's running the same container and not a modified malicious one? How do you provably slash people for going against the consensus? How do you know, like in Ethereum, for instance, like it might be vulnerable to a 51% attack, but you can at least tell if there is a 51% attack happening, because you would see it in the blockchain. It's cryptographically verifiable. You can see what's going on. In this mechanism, if 51% or even like a small percentage of gateways are running a malicious version of that favors them somehow, you would have no way of knowing that that's the case, and slashing them. And that's why I think like trying to build this as the required way to do things will lead us to a permission system. Whereas if we build it as an optional thing, then maybe there's going to be a consortium of gateways that are using this, and they're going to be much better at ISA than anyone that wants to plug in their own. I think it would be a super interesting research area of like how can we do like consensus for ISA, and it would be a powerful primitive to have in the network. I still think we can't use that as a required thing, because like people will always be able to go outside that in one way or another, and because it would be a permission, like it would still be a decentralized oracle and not a proper like blockchain or something that is more verifiable.
Well, is there some way of having the oracles, we're using Arbitrum now, like batch process these metrics and posting proofs on chain, like every epoch or something like that?
I mean, I don't think there's nothing to prove. It's like you're proving something that is subjective, that is, I sent someone a query and then they responded in X amount of time. That is like, it's like the speaker listener equivalence or something like that. It was mentioned in one of Vitalik's posts. Basically, there's no way of proving that the other person replied or didn't reply in a certain amount of time. Like there's no objective like thing that you can use outside of those. Like those two people know. There's no real way of proving that to anyone else, because it is something that happens between the two of them. You can't observe that. and that's why like we can leverage proofs for stuff that is involved in, like maybe that you're running the correct program for some of these things, but you can't prove the inputs to this in any way, because those inputs are out in the world and they depend on things that are impossible to like objectively verify.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mean the direct proofs of, this guy was 80 ms, this guy was 50 ms, but who was the best, which addresses, and then there's consensus on those addresses between the gateways. So there's addresses in a list of who was the best, who was the worst, not necessarily all the metrics living there, 70 ms, this response time, blah, 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 but the actual results of the indexer's address, and then posting those proofs on chain, taking the consensus from all the gateways, and then posting basically that list every epoch.
So I think as a decentralized ISA, that could work great. I don't think that could work as a required ISA, because again, like you have no way of verifying that there's no, like maybe there's an indexer that's coming in, a malicious one, and they bribe a couple of those gateways to like put them as the best. And like if they bribe enough people, then they can make it such that like they appear as the best. And there's no way to prove that the gateways lied and that they were bribed. So there's no way to actually slash those gateways. And that gives us a very like decentralized, a very like permissioned mechanism. Even with audit logs, like you can't prove things. Yeah, I mean you have to prove against everyone else, but what I'm saying is that's vulnerable to a very cheap attack. Like when you're in a proof of stake mechanism, if you can, there was this analysis by Vitalik about like, and it's the reason they introduced slashing in Ethereum. Basically, if you can't slash, an attacker could credibly promise to reward folks for voting the wrong thing, and they can get a much cheaper attack than requiring the 51% of the stake. So
it should definitely be slashable for sure. There should be.
You can make, but it's only slashable if the majority agrees.
Yes.
On the slashing. So there is a way where you can subvert the game dynamics here by promising to pay anyone who gets slashed in a way that in the end makes it much cheaper for the attacker to subvert the majority. Where was this?
I just posted in the chat the triangle of harm that was a little post by Vitalik. I think that's where he mentions the speaker listener fault tolerance and the griefing factors on either side.
Yeah, there's that one, and then the other one that I just shared. No, it's not that one. I can share that if you want, Vincent. I can look for that and share it later. But basically, there is a way, in any staking mechanism, where slashing is based on majority. If you can convince people that you will pay whoever is on the minority, if they get slashed by voting, for voting whatever you want them to vote, then you can subvert them. You can make it rational to vote for whatever you want to vote at a much lower cost than 51% of the stake. So I don't think we could use a consensus like that as the basis for ISA in the network that is required, because it would be vulnerable to that. It would be very easy to attack.
Yeah, I think there's definitely holes that need to be filled, but I do think it's worth exploring.
Yeah, I mean, so I definitely agree it's worth exploring. I think we could discuss this a bit more in the forums maybe, but I don't think it's something that we should think of as an alternative to indexing fees, but as something that we can use to build on top of indexing fees, and as something that we can use as like standard ISA maybe, but not as the required ISA. Like I think if we try to build that, we're gonna waste like a few years of research, and we're gonna end up with something that's more permissions and that is like more brittle, because it will be like attackable in these ways.
Wasn't the general
yeah, maybe
consensus within 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗀 that we're gonna get rid of the inflation one day?
I mean, that was consensus among a few folks. I don't know, like, I wouldn't treat that as the ultimate consensus. I don't know if we're gonna do that or not. I think it's a bit too early to say. There are many people, myself included, that think that issuance can still be used to drive useful things in the network. So issuance driven by a DAO or something like that, I think would be a very powerful primitive to fund things like ongoing development of new features. I don't know, supporting indexers and like reinforcing decentralization, as I said, by, for instance, adding more indexing fees for new indexers, like for additional indexers besides what people pay, stuff like that. So I don't know if like that necessarily like will necessarily go towards removing indexing rewards or issuance in general in the future, maybe reducing it. I don't know. If the consensus from the community is when we get there, like we don't need them anymore, then maybe, but like I think it's still too early to kind of take a strong position on that.
Got it, fair enough.
Yeah. But yeah, I will say like there are some team members that think removing issuance in the long term is the best way forward.
Alrighty. I'm going to take this opportunity to say thank you so much, Pablo. I know that you said you want to leave at the half an hour mark, and I want to respect that because you've been more than generous with your time. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me, and it's always good to be here. And yeah, Vince, let's continue this conversation. I will be here next week, but we can keep chatting through other channels as well.
Amazing, amazing. Well, you can see in the chat, everyone's loving you, showing you a lot of love, and it's well deserved. You're an awesome guest, and you're more than welcome next week. And yeah, excited to get through this. It's clearly something that people want to hear more about. So yeah, great to know that you're available and we can talk about it. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around with us today, for attending and sticking around without. Jesus Christ, I can't speak English. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today and also sticking around past the hour mark. I found this incredibly enlightening. I hope you guys did too. And as we mentioned, this is going to be part 2 is going to happen next week, same time. So we look forward to having you all there next week. What a wonderful sound effect to end today's call. Thank you so much, guys, and see you next week.